Witness to an execution, the Big Juju Ferry of West Africa. Prologue. Russia is a very large country. Okay. You already knew that, but it is twice as large in land mass than its nearest rival, Canada, and I thought it worth mentioning. Thank God it is not leading, not even close, in population. All the make people impoverished, starving, and illiterate countries have population characteristics of human gatherings beat by miles. The latter do what they do best. Yes. And I'm not about to cut them any slack. The big fat guys and ladies at the top only leave crumbs for the rest of the pile, and a very mealy bag of crumbs it is. Not wanting to introduce an inflammatory predisposition, I am heading straight back to Russia, which, as I said, is a very large country. Its impact on me has been substantial, going back to my earlier days when the icon, the Virgin of Vladimir, would shine its perfect light on me, composed as it was in the perfect style created over centuries, pouring their melted metals over wood boards, mixing in the crushed pigments of color, to affix with brushes the faces of the saints or even the face of God himself onto a level plane, and in the infinitesimal time of light, reflecting back off that surface and the icon becoming as if a thing real, holy, and alive. I never forget the icons of Russia. One of the items taken by the Empress Alexandra of Russia to have with her on what was expected to be a long journey, an ordeal of significant magnitude, was a most highly venerated icon. Perhaps given to her by the mad monk Rasputin. More mystery and mysticism, a long line of which pervades the centuries of Mother Russia. From this area of Empress Alexandra's and the Romanovas family's demise, one can follow the lowly Ural Mountains continually to the north, jump over a piece of water, Kara Sea, and approach Novaya Zemlya, island home of Tsar Bomba, the largest and last Russian nuclear bomb test site. The mad monk was assassinated. The Romanovs too. We know a great deal of how the mad monk met his creator, but very little of the family now long vanished into the spirit world. What follows is a fanciful accounting of death by execution. Tsars, mystics, and the new young people. How is it that I have got myself sit down in front of an antiquated laptop to begin a narrative that was intended to be on a certain type of maritime vessel? Like this it is. I picked up a book from my collection of titles of all sorts strewn in most localities of my living quarters, this one in an outdoor man cave. It was cold out and I found it to be cumbersome to turn pages of the book with gloves on, and decided to take me and the book inside to continue the read, but once inside switched gears to attempt a writing. Loose Among Devils was the book. The vessel I was of a mind to investigate was the Ferry, and had been thinking that ferries were quite a ubiquitous item, so when last night I saw a very slight version of one, a smallish canoe being a commercial ferry good enough to accommodate about 6 or 7 passengers all sitting in a line, stern to bow, with the ferryman seated and paddling behind his fares. Taking place on a remote stretch of Amazon, the overcrowded vessel had little freeboard and capsized, all hands lost. With no time to digest what I had just witnessed, I was thrown into a filming of the Congo, which just so happened to have taken advantage of a Congo River tour I was close to biting on, which offered primitive conditions and a chance to be on the mighty river and stopping over for night shutdown among people still living greatly isolated from the rest of us. Well, that was it. The ferry and the Congo. Sometimes, I thought, you just have to go with the flow, and with the Congo, that's a might big flow. Then, as things would have it, this morning I'm looking at a bunch of Swedes making and living in tree houses, telling me how wonderful such a life is. Obviously, they are unaware of my paleospace, designed and assembled to mimic the age just prior to the new Stone Age. With the Swedish challenge in mind, I went outdoors, sure to find ways of improving Paleoland, let's just call it that for now. So outside. Cold man cave. Book. Then this. Ferries have been around forever. If you are looking for technical accuracy, forget it. Don't care. No stuff, right or wrong, that's the way to go. Pause to think of the ferry taking Muslim pilgrims from Aden to Mecca, which starts to sink, the passenger abandoned by the officers, making poor Lord Jim live out his life with a superabundance of self-hate, an outcast in some backwater lagoon, he being so ashamed of his behavior. Of course, in Conrad's novel, the ferry does not sink, and when the officers arrive in port find that all have been saved and they will be facing a court of inquiry. And if there are ferries, then there must be waterways. God, just think of the number of rivers. There's the Bug, the Oxus, the Nile, the Irrawaddy, the Mekong, and the Amazon, the Amur, the Indus, Brahmaputra, and the Ganges, Mississippi, Colorado, and the River Grande, Shannon, Thames, and Seine. Almost unending number of rivers. In thinking of the greatness of the Congo River, I formulated yet another axiom. I do this a lot, kind of like the stuff Plato and Aristotle used to come up with, that states with all the conviction I can muster that human populations, scattered about the earth and wedged into every conceivable geographic niche, take from their unique ecological platforms the parameters of their culture. And by the way, don't you just love it when some large head tells us how Plato and Aristotle brought us towards the light? Thanks, guys. City Island, Bronx had a ferry out to Hart Island where there was a potter's field. Did not go, but some teenagers one cold winter night took off in a rowboat and attempted to cross the short arm of Long Island Sound to get to the island. What they made was the news headlines as the boat swamped and they drowned. There may have been some beer involved and they may have wanted to be in the cemetery, but I am not sure. Staten Island and Kowloon ferries played big in my take of this world, as did the Block Island, Orient Point, Shelter Island, and Port Jefferson ferries. The Block Island ferry had an elderly man dressed 19th century, escorted by a young lady, he with book and cane. For sure a really big ferry time was across the Illinois and Missouri rivers near where they meet up with Old Man River. Heck of a float. Ferry got pushed out into the Illinois and by virtue of the current of that hefty stream slid into the other side, landing and in Missouri. I was much surprised we were not attacked by outlaws. Did get to stop in Defiance Mo. Just into me for happy hour, which I shared with a burger, fries, and some beer. This was all in the vicinity where up over a hill rose out of the horizon a newish development with the astonishing name of Wenberg. Can you imagine? But all these ferries were not like Big Juju of West Africa, as that vessel made its trade on things African. And good for me having taken a look, for now I know a little more comprehensively about the Niger River, and will, I assume, come to know more about the Congo River, the Big Juju of all. A man once was attacked by a Goliath tiger fish in the Congo, torn horribly he was pulled out of the river. A voodoo medicine man happened to be nearby. He performed juju on the victim, stuffing his ears with cooked rice then jumping on his chest. The man made a complete recovery. This is Big Juju. But wait, there is more. I am hoping to find the spread of juju and voodoo into Southeast Asia, Indonesia, you know, the archipelago, but none so far. My reasoning goes as follows. Merchant sailors from South Asia plied all the seas and may very well have brought back to their homeland vestiges of the voodoo culture. Anything is possible, but it doesn't have to be true. When the Big Juju ferry docked in Lagos, the yard workers twitched their noses due to the acrid smell of salted fish many of its passengers brought with them. William handled a forward line, then ensured the ramp was properly lowered and the passengers safely disembarked. He left home 5 years ago and was now back home. The Washington Heights section of New York City provided for his shelter while away. A tall, husky young man with an almost constant broad smile, he adapted well to this new land. He took the uptown subway most days to get home from work. A middle-aged woman carrying a musical instrument case, most likely, he thought a violin, appeared in the same subway car as he more often than not. He guessed the woman had emigrated from Russia and could play the violin in a very polished manner. She got off at one of the stops for Washington Heights and William's heart was gladdened by the thought he was living amongst such a luminary who was very possible a world-class violinist. Such was his good fortune that all was upbeat wherever he went. Even the less than lovely streets of Upper West Side Bronx were a marvel of the wellness of life that in the right persons could be dispersed in volumes. Happy was the day he had made enough money to consider a trip home. The African dreams of a million spaces was always with him, and it excited him to think of touching all those high-spirited souls scattered in the West African jungles, beaches, and sands. He also knew he would have to support himself while in Africa, and he hit on the ferry as a way to fill that need. William's sister, Shauna, had advanced her violin playing a great deal since he first went to the States. So she takes an award. Wins trip to competition in USA, Manhattan School of Music. William, acting as escort, goes with her. William pays attention and hears talk about nationalities and which make the finest musicians. The Russians, Eastern European, German, French, of course. They get it, but the jury is still out on the rest of the world, particularly those meddling Asians. William could not have been aware of my joke about Fuente Fox and George Bush the Younger, who is the president of Mexico. Fuente Fox. Who is the president of the United States? Fuente Fox. So the new joke is, what is the capital of China? Beijing. Wrong. Princeton. Anyway, Asian, African, Russian. At the very highest level the music is about the same. It is only when one descends to the lower tiers of musical talent, do things get murky. I once heard an interviewee on some classical FM station bemoan the fact that he and other lesser-known musicians never get played on the radio stations. Only the old war horses of the classical repertoire. Talking through the radio, I said to the person, "Of course you don't get played. Because you stink." At the college, he also saw the violin lady he traveled with on the uptown subway to Washington Heights. She would be one of the judges for the competition. This certainly was an example of big juju. Down from a little north of the city came a story of a skeleton found along the Sawmill River Parkway. A shallow dirt grave washed out by a torrential multiple-day rain. Child and headless. Scratch, scratch the dog went. Bam, bam the policeman came. As this was just across the county line into Yonkers, I did not think it unusual, as there were always stories about Yonkers and blood affairs with killing chickens. And close to where Son of Sam lived. Lord, give me mercy. Big bad juju. Shauna won a prize to no one's surprise, as Shauna was always the best in any of her pursuits. William heard the uptown subway riding violinist lady remarking how she had never seen any good, great violinist bow without bending the bowing wrist, except for Nathan Milstein, who I once saw late 20th century Woodbury Performing Arts Center, one hot summer night, the auditorium so full it was as if people were hanging from the rafters. A frenzied, gigantic, well-behaved mob gave worship to the man. A wizard was standing among us. Aaron Copeland, Appalachian Spring, Shauna William, West Africa Swede, subspecies of lion, West African air heated over the hotlands of the interior rise up and move out over the Atlantic, sometimes resulting in tropical storms and hurricanes. People in Miami, the Jersey Shore, and the Outer Banks may every few years become acquainted with these storms, so much palm oil transform the people, elephants, and gold. Gold up through Mali and Timbuktu up to North Africa. The Levant. Trade with backward Europe to build a region to live and die in. Spawning eventually a few good novels. Graham Greene, Virginia Woolf. 8,000 miles or more to the east and south, the Congo River rapids devour whole canoes loaded with people never to be seen again. Henry Stanley takes a job for the Little Dwarf of Belgium, and both are eventually scuttled on the dirt heap of history. Livingston at least thought how the leopard kills. By jumping your back and tearing you with hind paws, he leaves out the part of the bacteria the leopard leaves which does the killing. Having been granted their independence post-World War II, the nations of Africa fought small wars to see who would get most of the pies becoming available. Many years, but now I understand you can pretty much walk around West Africa safely. I don't know about the Congo. The rapids are still there as well as the Goliath tigerfish. Oh. Back in the day when the pygmies walked through their forests even though it was daytime, it was dark as nighttime where they thread. Rhine forests. You got it? Surfing beaches? It can be yours. Vibrant people in all those folksy markets all over the place. Wide difference in the economic placement between rich and poor? You bet. Why not visit West Africa and maybe the Congo just for a thrill? Lots of ferries to get you where you wanted to go in the past as well as the present. If there was killing going on, maybe the ferry no-go big man stopped them. Killing, they say, must not do but sometimes you must do and lots of people die. Much worse when they get the rifle and the grenade, then they kill aplenty. Tutsi and the Husi. Communists and the big trader. Gold, ivory, cobalt, copper. Maybe escape by plain diamonds. Lake Tanganyika, Upper Congo, Niger, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire. Pavalar with village chiefs cheat them, then there must be kill. Plenty kill all over the world news. Che Guevara tries to get in the act, wants to blow up a dam in East Congo, tries, but the Congo eats him, silly man. And the big guys had taken themselves out for safety, but they still killed all over the place. Nothing was too good to be for killing. CM Forrester gets into the act with his African queen. I looked into this chick flick. Where is the killing? Well, it is there big time way back. Arab and Portuguese traders before Jamestown or Plymouth taking slaves to improve their bottom lines until the rest of the world must have slaves. No joking around. Then about 2 centuries later the dwarf king of Belgium buys the whole kitten caboodle of the interior of the dark continent for his own private domain. Stanley sets that up for him. But this stirs up the big guys in Europe and they all want to get in on the action. Around 1884 they meet in what becomes known as the African Conference and divvy the continent up amongst themselves. That would be England, France, Germany and a few others. By the beginning of world was one Africa belonged to the Europeans. Africans had some successes beating them back, think Zulu, but for the most part it was kill, kill, kill and put the bastards in the ground. The queen could always argue she was too busy with her dope fiend subjects in China to know much what was going on in Africa.